Hi everyone, I'm Masoud from Iran. Today we are going to speak about the literature review. My best advice is to seek the opinion of your advisor or faculty members as to how they would like to see the literature addressed. I truly recommend to my advices that the literature review in proposal be brief and provide a summary of the major studies on the research problem. It does not need to be fully developed and comprehensive at this point, since faculty may ask for major changes in the study as a proposal meeting. In this model, the literature review is shorter, say 20 to 30 pages in length, and tells the reader that the student is aware of the literature on the topic and the latest writings. The literature review in a journal article in an abbreviated form of that found in a dissertation or master's thesis. It typically is contained in a section called Related Literature and follows the introduction to a study. This is the pattern for quantitative research articles in journals. For qualitative research articles, the literature review may be found in a separate section included in the introduction or threaded throughout the study. Regardless of the form, another consideration is how the literature might be reviewed, depending on whether qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods or approach has been selected. Okay, qualitative research. In qualitative research, researchers use literature in a manner consistent with assumptions of learning from the participant. Not prescribing the questions that need to be answered from the researcher's standpoint. One of the chief reasons for conducting a qualitative study is that the study is exploratory. This usually means that not much has been written about the topic or the population being studied, and the researcher seeks to listen to participants and build an understanding based on what is heard. Quantitative research. Quantitative research, on the other hand, includes a substantial amount of literature at the beginning of a study to provide direction for the research questions or hypotheses. It is also used to introduce a problem or to describe in detail the existing literature in a section titled Related Literature or Review of Literature or some other similar phrases. Also, the literature review can introduce a theory and explanation for expected relationships. Describe the theory that will be used and suggest why it is a useful theory to examine. At the end of a study, the researcher then revisits the literature and makes a comparison between the results with the existing findings in the literature. In this model, the quantitative researcher uses the literature deductively as a framework for the research questions or hypotheses. Mixed methods study. In mixed method studies, the researchers use either a qualitative or a quantitative approach to the literature. Depending on the type of strategy being used, in a sequential approach, the literature is presented in each phase in a way consistent with the method being used. For example, if a study begins with a quantitative phase, then the investigator is likely to include a substantial literature review that helps to establish a rationale for the research questions or hypotheses. If the study begins with a qualitative phase, then the literature is substantially less, and the researcher may incorporate it more into the end of the study. An inductive approach. If the researcher advances a concurrent study with an equivalent emphasis on both qualitative and quantitative data, then the literature may take either qualitative or quantitative forms. My suggestions for using the literature in planning a qualitative, a quantitative, or mixed methods study is in a qualitative study, use literature sparingly in the beginning in order to convey an inductive design unless the design type needs a substantial literature orientation as a start. Consider the most appropriate place for the literature in a qualitative study and base a decision on the audience for the project. Keep in mind the options, placing it at the beginning to frame the problem, placing it in a separate section and using it as the end to compare and contrast with the findings. Use the literature in a quantitative study deductively as a basis for advancing research questions or hypotheses. In a quantitative study plan, use the literature to introduce the study, describe related literature in a separate section, and compare findings. In a mixed methods study, use the literature in a way that is consistent with the major type of strategy and the quantitative or qualitative approach most prevalent in the design. Regardless of the type of study, consider the type of literature review to conduct, such as an integrative, critical, building bridges among topics. Or the identification of central issues. Okay, steps in conducting a literature review. A literature review means locating and summarizing the studies about a topic. Often these are research studies because you are conducting a research study, but they may also include conceptual articles or opinions pieces that provide frameworks for thinking about topics. There is no single way to conduct a literature review. But many scholars proceed in a systematic fashion to capture, evaluate, and summarizes the literature. Here is the way I recommend. Begin by identifying keywords, which is useful in locating materials in an academic library at a college or university. These keywords may emerge in identifying a topic or may result from preliminary readings. With these keywords in mind, you go next to the library or use your home computer and begin searching the catalog for holdings, that is, journals and books. Most major libraries have computerized databases, and I suggest you focus initially on journals and books related on the topic. Initially, try to look at about 50 reports of research in articles or books related to research on your topic. Set a priority on the research for journal articles and books because they are easy to locate and obtain. Skim the initial group of articles or chapters and duplicate those that are central to your topic. Throughout this process, simply try to obtain a sense as to whether the article or chapter will make a useful contribution to your understanding of the literature. As you identify useful literature, begin designing a literature map is discussed more fully later. This is a visual picture or figure of grouping of the literature on the topics that illustrates how your particular study will contribute to the literature, positioning your study within the larger body of research. As you put together the literature map, also begin to draft summaries of the most relevant articles. These summaries are combined into the final literature reviews that you write for your proposal or research study. After summarizing the literature, assemble the literature review, structuring it thematically or organizing it by important concepts. And finish the literature review with a summary of the major themes and suggest how your particular study further add to the literature and addresses a gap in the themes. I think that's enough for today. Thanks for your listening. If you have any question, please don't hesitate me and subscribe and support our channel with inviting your friend. Thank you again.